Hey guys. Sorry about that, guys. I know it's a little confusing. My first stream wasn't working properly. Just let me get my tea. Hi Andrea. Hi Whitney. Hi Deanna. Hello Lisa. Lots of thank yous and gratitude for your wonderful and generous work. You're a great inspiration for me and I look forward to every live stream. Thanks Deanna. Hey Sue. So hi guys, welcome to live stream. If this is your first time on live stream, then the way to ask questions is through Skype. My address is Lisa Cairns 12. And I tend to do them every Wednesday and Sunday, but always check my website because there's dates obviously when I can't do them and it's publicized on my website. If you want to come to an event, I'm doing an event in Spain, Cana, in about 3 weeks' time, and there's still some space left. And if you want to sponsor someone, then you can sponsor someone. We have a list of people that need help to go on the retreat, to pay for some of their retreat or their flights. We so far have one person sponsored, and we have a bit more money for somebody else, but they need more money. So if you feel like you'd like to sponsor someone, then just go onto my website and you can find the info and who to write to. Hello. I can see Khaleesi wants in. She just stares at me. Come on then. I got your little boo boo. I got your little boo. I got your little boo boo. Hey guys, I don't know how that chat has been loud on again. I'm trying to find a way to switch it off. It's no, advanced. Enable live chat. There we go. And you guys are off. Hey Jason. Hey Robert. So non-duality is remembering who you are beyond the person. Non-duality isn't about healing the person or fixing the person. But I think in order to experience true healing, there needs to be the recognition of non-duality. But non-duality isn't about healing the person. So if you do therapies without hearing non-duality as well and recognizing that you aren't that personality structure, then it's impossible to really heal from from that. It can become more balanced, I presume, but if it's not hearing non-duality as well, then it just stays in the wheel of itself. It needs to also recognize that who you are and who everyone is this alive presence, is this emptiness experiencing itself as fullness. And this isn't religious, this isn't a spiritual recognition, and this isn't for you. This is just the way things are. That right now you might believe you're sitting listening to someone, but actually there is no separate entities experiencing this life. Separate entities are experienced, but they're not the experiencer. Your personality structure isn't the experiencer. And this is a remembering of that, a remembering that who you are is this boundless freedom that's beyond you. And with that recognition, then all the therapies you do and personal development will more than likely have a better effect, as that person won't be struggling to try to get rid of itself or try to find freedom in that personality structure. There'll be an absolute acceptance of it the way it is, and through that acceptance, this is when the healing really begins. If you're always trying to run away from yourself, then there can't be a true healing. And when there's a belief that you are the personality, then there's always going to be the attempt to run away. You're always going to believe that the future will give you home, whereas home is your nature, and in that arises a personality structure. And believing you're that personality structure always covers home, veils that freedom, and makes you feel like you need to get it in the future, or in something, or in an item, or in an event. One of the problems or difficulties about talking about non-duality is the person expects non-duality to be an event, and it's not an event. Seeing who you are isn't an event, it's been there the whole time. It's just what's been covering it is this person. This belief that you're experiencing this life, that you're moving through time, and that you're separate from this life, you're separate from other people. And the remembering of this isn't and cannot be an event, because who would it be an event for? Who would get this? So what is non-duality? Non-duality has two sides of the same coin. It's nothing and it's everything. And this nothing isn't something you can imagine. It's non-existence, it's absolute emptiness. It's not something you can see. We think, oh, we can see nothing. It's just nothing looking out. Nothing experiencing. And it's also everything, because what is it that's experiencing life right now? And you'll notice that life is experiencing itself, and it comes from no place. And the everything part is love. The nothing part is wisdom. That nobody's ever suffered this life. There's not anyone that's suffered this life. Personality structure has had pains and pleasures and suffering, but it's seen that that personality structure isn't the experiencer. It's an experience. And the personality structure will suck this into its way of thinking, and it will look to emotions for freedom. It will look to ways of being as freedom. So it might hear this message and feel hopeless, like I can't get there. But this is just the personality structure. It's got a habit of feeling hopeless, and so it hears this and it adds that to its hopelessness. But what is it that's experiencing that personality structure, that hopelessness? If you feel like you're separate and you feel like you can do things, then go into that feeling. Recognize where it is. Put the attention there and see the thoughts that are produced by it, and recognize the other times in your life when you've produced those thoughts. And see that there is something that's free, that's experiencing that appears in this alive presence, this alive sense of existence. And you aren't that one that feels hopeless. You are that which it's appearing in, that infinite space in which it appears in. We often just listen to non-duality through our personality structures. If we struggle to feel emotions, then we like the fact that I say it's nothing. Or maybe if you feel lots of emotions, you like to hear it's nothing. Because maybe there is a wanting to feel less, or you can recognize that you don't feel much, so you can recognize that nothing, but that's all in the personality structure, and that comes and goes in this alive presence, which is not a thing and everything, that's recognizing itself, and it's that sense of existence. This alive presence contains consciousness, but that consciousness isn't separate from anything. The consciousness is in all things, and the same with the sense of existence. We think we're alive, but actually there is aliveness, and this body appears and disappears in that. And we have a certain reaction to the speaker. So I'm sitting here talking about non-duality, and there can be lots of different reactions to that speaker. And again, depending on your personality structure, will depend on whether you like me or not, or whether you accept me or not. And we believe that that's got something to say about me as a speaker, or me communicating non-duality. But there's nobody communicating non-duality. There's nobody to be judged. My personality structure isn't the communicator of non-duality. It's just being communicated through this personality structure. Non-duality doesn't belong to anyone. You think my words are moving because of my own choice and my own free will, but life is moving these words. Life is moving this mouth. A live presence, or the big you, or the big I, or the I am, or the empty looking, or the consciousness, or whatever you express it to be, the nothing, the everything. But you look at my personality structure and then there's a judgment on that level. And you think that that's actually judging the non-duality, and it can't. You'll either like me or don't, or not like me. You'll admire me or you'll be jealous of me. You'll love me or you'll hate me, and maybe you oscillate between all of that. All of those different feelings, and none of them are true. And whatever feelings you feel are perfectly valid, and as they are, just recognize that feeling. When I say perfectly valid, I'm not saying they're right, but they're valid because they're appearing. So recognize that feeling. If it's beauty or annoyance, just see it for what it is. See the thoughts are produced. See it's not true. And then see it's all appearing in this sense of existence, in this empty looking. And it appears and disappears, and that isn't who you are. You're not someone that's annoyed or frustrated or loving me or liking me or happy. You are this presence that never moves. It doesn't feel feelings. Feelings come and go in it. It doesn't feel a body comes and goes in it. And has feelings and thoughts and smells and sounds. Okay, so I'll take some questions now. Do you travel to the United States? No, not very often. I do a lot of stuff online. So you Americans have to come to Europe to see me. I'm sure though online we'll soon be sitting in a room together. So we won't even need to travel. We can do a whole retreat in my front room. Hi, Sue. There are no questions. So if you want to write me a question, you can on Skype, which is Lisa Cairns 12. And if you want to speak to me, then just send me a message saying you want to speak to me. Have your dreams changed after awakening? Nighttime dreams? No, I don't think so. I think dreaming is about your brain trying to digest what's happened during the day, or what's happened, or what traumas you're affected by. I think in dreaming you're digesting new information, so I don't think it will change. Hi Lisa, do you hold on to your life? I mean, do you prefer this life through a body and would rather not die? Or does it not come into your head much? It doesn't come into my head much. I think I have I've read articles on people, and I've known people that are into non-duality who were in immense physical pain and then killed themselves. And when I read it, I understood it and I didn't have any judgment of it. I remember seeing it and I remember lots of people judging it, and I understood it. But I don't know what I would do in that situation if I was in immense physical pain and there was no cure. But I'm not scared of death. There is fear that arises in the moment. So like this fear, say if a lion was chasing me or someone was being abusive, there's fear that arises in the body. But there's also not a fear of death. That's a lot deeper. It's like I feel like I know what death is. But there's also an enjoyment of life, like the character enjoys life. But it's so clear here that who I am is that love and that emptiness which is beyond the character, and there's such a connection to that there's a lot of peace around death. But there is physical fear, like I'm a scaredy cat if something jumps at me or boos me, or got chased by a snake in the summer at the river. And then I found out afterwards that they have lethal snakes in France. I never knew that. Like, I've lived in Australia where every snake you see is lethal, nearly every snake. They say that if you see a snake, it's more than likely lethal. The only ones that aren't, I think, are the adders, the ones that strangle you. I suppose they could be lethal if they're big enough. And I didn't realise, so the first time I saw a snake, it kind of jumped at me in Khaleesi. And I jump a lot when I'm in the bush and something jumps at me. And then it sort of went off. And then later I was telling someone about it, and they said, I think it's called a viper, which is lethal. And they told me that there were lethal snakes, and I was like, no way, they're not lethal in France, they just hurt you. And then I looked up on the internet and I was like, oh, okay, they do. And then I was at the river again a few weeks later, and it must have been breeding season, because that's when snakes are aggressive. Me and Khaleesi got chased again, and I this time took a video and pictures of it. And I think it was a viper, but it could have also been this other one. It's hard to tell. But it was really funny because we were being chased, and then I dropped Khaleesi's lead and it got stuck on a tree, and so she couldn't get away from the snake, and then I couldn't leave Khaleesi, so I was on one side of the snake and Khaleesi was on the other. It was a small path, and I couldn't get around to Khaleesi, and I was afraid if I left Khaleesi, the snake would go for Khaleesi. So I was stood there with a big stick, Khaleesi on one side, and if it looked too much at Khaleesi, I sort of hit, but I was so ready to run. And I sort of was trying to hit the floor with the stick. And it took 10 minutes for it to finally give up. It was all puffed up. And I know it wasn't going, but it was all puffed up. I think it was at moments. I forget now. It's quite a while ago. So in that moment, I was afraid, and I was afraid for Khaleesi, but I'm not really afraid of death. I know that sounds like I am afraid of death, but that's just more the bodily reaction. That's a fear that arises in the body. But now there's such a grounding in that which is beyond that. But that doesn't mean the body doesn't respond in fear. And I know when you're identified, or if that hasn't been recognized, you think, how's that possible? But it's like there's this movement back or into this freedom that's there all the time. And then the body has all its little dramas and issues. But they really don't touch who you are, who's experiencing. And it does affect the person, like my personhood is a lot more relaxed than it's ever been, or a lot more balanced than it's ever been, but that's an effect. That's not the goal, and that doesn't mean that's the way it will always be. Lisa might suddenly start picking up neuroses about something, or an event might happen. But the key is who's looking out of these eyes now? Who's experiencing this life? The idea that it's you is an absolute lie. You're not the experiencer. This is where that infinite love is. Hey Jamil. Hey Keith. Did I answer all of you, Sam? I feel like I don't have the natural instinct most people have to stay alive, and I take risks. Should I work on it, or is it okay? I feel like I can't control anything really anyways. Much love. But I think that's the addict mentality, Sam. Like it's a disregard for yourself. Yeah, I would, if you're a recovering addict, I would always stay with that program. I wouldn't let non-duality talk you out of doing that program. And so I will still work on my characteristics. I still work on my habits. I have addictive habits just like everybody else. I don't work on my cup of tea addiction though. I sometimes I have attempted to give up tea in my life. When you're English, you start. I think I started my first cup of tea when I was 10, maybe younger, and everybody drinks tea. I mean, I remember I had a friend who only drank herbal tea, and she was like, it's just the thing that we drink. And I have given it up, but the way I gave it up was I drink decaf tea, decaf English tea, but it's not as good. I just love it. I love it. But anyway, I don't work on that, even though I'm going to get lots of emails about how I should now. If I ever mention anything like that, I always get emails giving me advice on it. I don't have any intention or will to give up black tea, so it's pointless, your emails. But I do work on my personality traits, and I work on emotions, because like everybody, I've got personality traits. I've got things that I've worked out that I go towards that aren't as healthy for me as other things. And I have learned and understood that. And actually, if you just go down to your feelings, your body knows, but it's like a habit that you've been taught. Your body knows what to do. Look, it's something that you've been taught for 20 years while living with your parents. And so, so it's like if a dog had a habit of peeing on a tree every day, when it goes past that tree, it's going to want to keep peeing on it. And 20 years of living with your parents, or of growing up in your particular situation, however you guys grew up, that's a lot of conditioning. So yes, there's particular situations. So Sam says Sam's British, and Sam says I have a cup of tea too. We just love it. We love it. I just love a cup of tea. That's sweet, the leaf Asbon. It's like a heart. So as you get older in life, you begin to recognize, not that I'm that much older than you, Sam, but you begin to recognize your patterns if you're into this subject and if you're sensitive, and sometimes you have to make a conscious effort to not do that pattern again. And sometimes those patterns are going to repeat on you maybe for a lifetime, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's no shame in that, and every time you do it, there's nothing to beat yourself up about. You just recognize that it's been done, and you're open to that change to happen again. I always try to find examples from my own personal life to make it more understandable what I'm talking about. But I can't think of one now. But there's loads of habits that I have where I'm aware that that's not the best choice for me. Thanks. Watching at work now, cheeky. Sorry. Oh, thanks, Sam. Yeah, nice to speak with you. With pleasure. Hi, Deanna. Lisa, are traumas in the body or in our mind memory? I'm a bit confused about this. From my experience, everybody's going to say a different thing. So you get so many different answers. Like if you Googled this, you'd get loads of different answers. And there'd be lots of different essays on it. And I'm no expert on traumas, but just from my own personal experience of working with my traumas, and everybody who's past the age of 5 has had traumas. Traumas are, we all get traumatized, like from falling over and hitting your head and having to have stitches, from your mother or father saying no too aggressively. We all have these shocks which imprint on us, and then we learn from them, and they make up our personality, not just the traumas but also the positive experiences. And people say, some say it's in the memory, some say it's body, some say it's genetic, that some of our traumas are genetic. I know with dogs, I think this is super cool, and this dogs should have an inbuilt fear of snakes. So all those videos, and I presume it's the same for cats. So all those videos that you see on the internet where cats are jumping at cucumbers? I suspect it's because they think that the cucumber is a snake. I wonder if you put a carrot there or anything else that's long and thin, they would jump at. But dogs are meant to have that inbuilt fear of snakes. So genetically, that trauma of snakes has been passed on. Traumas is the way we learn. The problem that we have with traumas is most probably is to do with our thinking. So when Khaleesi's afraid of something, she just responds with fear, and she's quite a fearful dog because she's a wild dog, and wild dogs have more fear and more prey instinct. In domesticated dogs, we've bred that out, and we breed and focus on dogs that show less fear, more sociability, and less prey instinct. Sometimes in some breeds we keep the prey instinct, and we use the prey instinct to help train the dog. But we tend to have less, and we tend to breed less aggression and in domesticated dogs. But Khaleesi's a wild dog and comes from wild gene pool. She's a street dog in Thailand, where it wasn't domesticated dogs. There was some domesticated dogs, but it was mostly just wild dogs breeding, had done for generations. And so she's got high fear levels, which is very normal. And when we're out in the forest, the thing is I'm an empath character, an empathy character. So sometimes she can have fear and simultaneously we both jump. Like, it's quite funny watching us, because she can really jump if she gets afraid of something, but I can sometimes simultaneously jump with her. Like, we both get afraid at the same time. And for me, there's nothing that I can see to be afraid of. Normally with Khaleesi, it's like a leaf or something, or something I can't see. And she's been traumatized by some things. I've traumatized her with my bike, because a few times we've fallen off. She's pulled me off in the first place, but then that frightens her when I fall off. So that's been a bit of a trauma. So she's very wary of the bike, because I mean, she's put me in hospital one time. No, not hospital, I just had to go to the doctors actually, but I had really bad concussion. And a few times, she's been tied to the bike and the bike's fallen over. And I do off-road biking, so it's quite aggressive biking that I do, so I sometimes have accidents. So her reaction of the bike is she enjoys it because it's exercise, comes with the bike, but she's also very wary of the bike and keeping her distance of the bike, and she doesn't like sudden movement of the bike. And this is wise that she's got that she's wary of this, because if she wasn't, it could potentially hurt her. But it's very instantaneous with Khaleesi. she can't really think about it. So when we're sat upstairs, she can't really think, in 2 hours, Lisa's going to get that fucking bike and she's going to fall on me again. Who does she think she is getting that bike and scaring me like that? With Khaleesi, she can only have more instant fears. Like, maybe she can imagine the bike up here, but I doubt it. I doubt that she's having fear up here about the bike. I think that to her, fear is only arising in the moment of it. When she sees the bike, she's like... But she actually likes the bike too, because she loves the exercise of it. She's just wary. She's never... I don't even think I've squashed her with the bike. It's me that's got squashed. But she hears the sounds of it and me crying. But maybe I have... You know, I think there's been little gentle accidents with her where the wheels hit her a little bit or something. You know, she's running from the wheel. But mostly it's been me. But that's over. We've biked thousands of times, and most of it has only been 5 big accidents. Oh, we're not even big, but 5 accidents, or maybe more. So I don't think that she can imagine when it's not there. Like, even if the bike was behind her, and she was looking at me, and she didn't know it was there, I'm not sure if she would be, or if she had been looking at it and then she looked at me, I'm not even sure if she'd have that memory of it. Whereas the human has this complicated brain which can. And my friend told me this story once, which I found amazing, was of both his children throwing toys over their heads. And he said this happened with both his children. And at some point, the child would throw the toy over the head or throw it on the floor, and the toy would disappear and the baby would have no reaction. There would be 0 reaction to it. It'd throw it and the toy was gone, and that was it. And I guess that Khaleesi's a little like that in that stage, that when something's out of sight, if she can't smell it or hear it, then it's just gone and there's no ability to recap on that. Then the baby goes to the next stage. The baby throws the toy over the head and then, meow, 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 like a psycho, looks around at the toy and recognizes that the toy still exists. So the baby throws the toy over its head, it turns, it looks at the toy and it recognizes that it's still there. So that's the second stage, and then it goes through the third stage. It throws the toy over the head and then just instantly starts crying because it can recognize, it can know, or it knows that the toy exists without it. So the third stage is that the baby can recognize that the toy is gone and it still exists even though it's not in sight. It knows it still exists. So if we're a human, and say if I was a human and I had a bike accident with someone, that person could be replaying that bike accident in their head in the evening, the next day. They keep thinking about it and bringing it up. And what happens by the repetition of thinking about a trauma is it's kind of like there's the trauma, the natural reaction. So when they next meet a bike, they'll be afraid of the bike. But then what happens on top of that is, because the person keeps obsessively thinking about that trauma, is the trauma gets bigger and bigger. And then there might be feelings of hate towards me. Like, why did she cycle into me? Why did she do that? Who does she think she is? She needs to be punished, etc. And these other thoughts develop on top of it. And this is, as we all know, this is where humans begin to suffer. So the amazing thing about awakening is that once you've been an identified human, you're going to have your patterns. So you're going to have your patterns of feelings and your patterns of ways of thinking of things. And that's going to be in line with an identified person. But there can be this thing where you move back to what Khaleesi is, which is nothing experiencing, or everything experiencing. So Khaleesi and that baby is like a clean slate. So that clean slate is actually right here. It's who you are. It's actually what's experiencing it. You see, there's been so much of an identification with the story of you, with the story of the one that got run over by the bike or jumps in the forest, that emptiness that baby-likeness, that childlikeness, that wonder, the emptiness, the aliveness has been forgotten about, but it's still here. And this is why I feel like traumas and your past things can only begin to heal, or there can be a change when there's a recognition of who you truly are. Because it's almost like the reboot. It's like, it's like a reboot, because you go back to that nothingness of what you started as. And that's here in the experience. That's who's looking at me now. There's nothing looking out the eyes. And then it looks through this identity that's traumatized and thinks, she ran me over, who does she think she is, bad person, blah, 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 blah. But there's seeing that who you are is beyond that. And then it brings in this space and this freedom. And it's not freedom for the person, because there might be the same reaction that happens, but it most probably breaks the story really quick. And there's not that being in loss with it. There's like the emptiness while all the actions are happening, or while that trauma's played out. And what I've noticed, so the awakening was happening throughout my 20s, and then there was this big bang awakening that happened when I was 30, and that after that it was just recognized all the time who I truly was. There was just like, it just is there. It just was so obvious, and it was always there humming in the background. And sometimes there's more of a character, and sometimes there's less of a character. So if I'm sitting quietly and I have my eyes shut and I'm listening to music, or I'm asleep at night, then there's absolutely no identification with the body at all. There's no sense of being Lisa. There's just this infinite space. And then when Lisa's doing something or in conversation, then there's more of awareness of Lisa. So there's more of a construct that appears. And when you're totally identified, then it's covered who you actually are. Whereas when there's awakening, what tends to happen after awakening is there's always a knowing of who you are, and there's always that freedom that encompasses everything. So then what I found after I was 30 and I had that big explosion, it was just so obvious all the time, that freedom, is that when my traumas come up, there's this acceptance of them, and there's an easier working through of them, because there's not that strong identification that needs to blame or put it on someone or find a reason. There's this knowing of something that was never affected, and it's a lot more impersonal. So say there's something that somebody does, and I find out there's something that somebody's does or done to me, because so say if somebody in business does something now mean to me, or lies or cheats or something like that, first of all, your body's going to react in the way that it's been trained to the lying and cheating. So when somebody lies and cheats on you, your body's going to react depending on the lies and the cheating that's happened to you in the past. So your current traumas, like the body is like an imprint of this life. And since that awakening, I just don't really get lost in the story of it. So I don't spend days going on about how could they, or they're a bad person. There might be a questioning of their personality type and what they did, and trying to understand what they did, but at no point is there a belief that they're truly guilty. In the relative world, I would say you're guilty, and I might ask for an apology or for my money back or whatever it is, but there's a knowing so deeply that it's not their fault and it's not them. So it means that it travels through quicker, and there's a recognition. So when that happens, so if that happens, that somebody cheats you, which I'm sure it happens, I mean, that's part of being life. Someone shortchanges you, or if you're in India, you'll know it, or it could be a business thing, or somebody expects more money when you don't think you want to pay them that much money, whatever it is. So what happens in me now very quickly is instantly there's an emotion. So I'm not just lost in the story saying you're a bad person or you shouldn't do that or how dare you do that. There's an instant knowing there's an emotion here, so that I know that I'm having an emotional reaction to that. So I know that I'm feeling hurt. I might not understand it, but I know that there's feelings of discomfort in my body, and I might not be able to name it all because things can happen quickly, but there's a knowing. So there's a knowing that there's an emotion here. So there's a knowing that this will be seen in line with those emotions. So if I feel like they've treated me unfairly, there will be a feeling of unfairness and a thought of that. But there's also this other thing that knows that none of that's true, and that who they and I am, and this isn't intellectual, this is a feeling, or it's not a feeling, it's just what I am, is this emptiness. So then as well, simultaneously, the personality is having that reaction, but all their actions and all Lisa's actions are bathed in this emptiness. They're like being cleaned. Like nobody's having that suffering or that pain. Nobody's experiencing that person. So even though Lisa's got her particular reactions, like the character, behind that it's empty. There's nobody experiencing that, so everything's bathed in that. There's nobody that it hurts. So I'd say on the character level, it becomes easier to identify and understand the conditioning in this body. So it's easy to see if this happens, this body's going to have this reaction. So it's easy to see. And there's just this acceptance of it, and acceptance of the other person as well. But sometimes I can get lost in anger. Humans can be very, especially if you're an empathy character. Like if you're an empathy character, then humans can be infuriating because the other 90 or 80% of humanity don't have such strong empathy. And if you have very strong empathy, then it's sad to see what humans do to each other. Like and also if you're an empathy character, you always project and expect other people to act with as much empathy as you do, but they don't, because they just don't have those chemicals, so much chemicals. So sometimes there can be like frustration towards characters. When you're speaking, I realized the other day, this suddenly clicked for me, because when you're doing talks, like when I first started doing talks, I used to like to give people space to talk, and I used to think that they'd eventually censor themselves. So, you know, maybe they're asking a question, but it's taking 5 minutes. I would think that they would censor themselves, or they would be respectful eventually, because I think they'd be able to feel that. And it's like I've been talking 7 years, but I'm really beginning to see and understand, like really understand that they won't do that if they don't have enough empathy chemicals. Like they just won't censor themselves, because they're getting energy from talking. They're releasing as they talk about their problems, or release, or getting attention, or being heard. And they won't have that sensitivity. And it's not in my nature so much to be really intrusive when I speak with someone, to cut someone off or to try to stop them, because I feel empathy for them. But I realise they just won't stop unless I stop them. Which I've worked out to some degree, but it just gets more and more clear. If they don't have it, they don't have it. Something I've been wondering is why you have to have a concrete question before you can say something about this. Why do you sometimes have to wait until the words come? Can you say something you regret afterwards? When I listen to this more carefully afterwards, it's incredibly well formulated. Yeah, I can recognize regret, but that's a very important human functioning. You know, we get confused, like ultimately it's not my fault, but maybe regret's not quite the right word, but say if I you know, cycle into Khaleesi, I would regret doing that. Maybe that's not the quite right word. Or maybe if I snap at someone and lose my temper with somebody, I would maybe say to them afterwards, oh, I regret that, I apologise. And there would be a feeling of that, like a feeling of sadness that I was aggressive towards them. Not that they might not need that in that moment, but also it's not ideal to lose temper with people, but sometimes it happens. Why do I wait for the words to come? Because I don't really think about this subject too much. I do like to think and I like to reflect on things. Like I really enjoy reflecting, but I don't really think about things before I start talking about them. I just sit there and there's emptiness, and then words come when they come. I don't push it. Sometimes maybe if I'm in a public talk where there's like 100 people or 20 people, however many people there are there listening to me, maybe I will bring in a subject to try and get me speaking, but I don't push it. So I might bring in the word love and then see what comes to that. And why I like people to have questions is just simply because I don't want to be overwhelmed by their words too much. So if they, because I'm a sensitive character and I don't want to be really harsh with people, because I understand they're being super vulnerable when they phone up and speak with me. But at the same time, I'm not here to be overwhelmed by people's emotions or words, like for them to be being emotionally or verbally like bleh on me. Like sometimes people phone up and they're so intense in their speaking, like they haven't spoken for 2 weeks or something. They're like firing machine gun bullets at me. So if I'm asking people for more concise questions, then it's an attempt to try to get them to be more empathic and respectful to me as the speaker as well. Because I feel I'm an empathy character, so I feel everything. So if somebody's feeling nervous and they're trying to release their nerves by over speaking, I can feel it, but I also have compassion for them and don't want to blast them with, you're nervous, stop speaking so much. Could be great for them, but often it just traumatizes people and they feel so rejected by that, and they're not really conscious of what they're doing. So that's why I'm asking for concise questions for my own benefit. Like, so because I'm sure as listeners, if you listen to this regularly, you know exactly what I'm talking about when people call in and overspeak at me. In fact, sometimes some people write and complain in Skype that I'm letting someone do it. Whoa, this is from Robert. Whoa, I've been listening to these questions and your response and you've been answering my questions as I type them out. Wow, that often happens, isn't it? One thing that I would love to hear you discuss is the relationship between physical sensation of pain and discomfort, feelings of anger and anxiety. I find that these are interrelated to a large degree. When I'm experiencing significant pain and discomfort in the body, which seems to be happening more and more often, I notice that feelings of anger and anxiety will arise so much more quickly. When this happens, I find that I'm so much more quick to buy into something is not right here, story of the character, and then I'm totally identified. Yeah. Well, so the pain and the discomfort happens, and then your body-mind particular way of responding, which might be genetic, it could be from your parents, or it just could be a way that your personality is formed, is feeling anger and anxiety over that. And that's ultimately totally a welcome. Like, being human, we have all these humans' emotions, so there's anger at the pain and the discomfort. So when it happens, I would recommend just putting your attention into that anger and that anxiety, and just recognizing it, recognizing that thoughts aren't true, and seeing that there is something experiencing that behind that. There is this I am presence. But sometimes I have realized from working with people that you can get stuck in the feelings. And so if you feel like you're getting stuck in the feelings, you could try and release it in certain ways. There is a book called Waking the Tiger you could read, which is about releasing, or you could do something like this, which is kind of based on that idea, is that when you feel the anger, you can and when you feel the anxiety, I think that the anxiety is maybe the more basic feeling than the anger, but you can imagine something that transforms that. And this is just a bit of an emotional release. So you can imagine something. So you put the attention on anxiety, you feel the anxiety, and you imagine a story maybe that comes with that anxiety. So something from your past, that anger, or a situation, maybe one that's happening presently, and then you work out what you'd like to heal from that. So you think of something that will heal that. This is just a simple emotional release technique, and you can go more into it by looking online, and you could read Waking the Tiger. So basically, let me give you an example. So you're feeling pain. So say you're feeling jealousy. So you feel this feeling of jealousy, and it's painful. So say your girlfriend is doing something, and this feels painful, and you feel jealous, and anger and anxiety arise around it. And you can go back to a memory in your childhood, like try to think of something where you felt jealous before, a big jealousy, like in your childhood, where your sibling did something, or where your friend had something more than you, or where your friends abandoned you, and try to remember something from your childhood and it could be from a past life. Whatever comes, you just remember that, and you feel it in your body, and then you imagine that child, and you can almost imagine it in the third person, getting what it needed in that situation. So you imagine it being loved, or somebody embracing it, or someone coming and giving it what it was longing for. And what this does is it helps it release that energy out of the body. It helps shift it. Because I've noticed sometimes with some traumas, if people stay in it and you're just accepting it, which that's the ultimate goal, is to the allowance for everything to come and go, and really there has to be a movement back to who you truly are for that total allowance. But while that's getting stuck, you can either sit with the feeling and speak the feeling out. That's another thing you could do. Or you could use that technique to try to release the feeling as well. And it's not about a goal of getting enlightened. It's just just accepting the personality. You know, when it gets a cut, you put a plaster on it. Accepting the personality sometimes gets stuck. But this is what happens when we have complicated thinking. And as a creature, we evolve so quickly. Like, we've evolved so quickly in the last 100 years. So you just have to reboot the system sometimes. And you just keep allowing it when it comes, if it keeps coming, and know that there's nothing wrong with that you've never done anything wrong. And ultimately who you are is that I am, and that existence. You are that alive presence. I'm doing pretty. Do you think being an empathy character could be negative, kind of like victim mentality? No, not at all. I think being an empathy character is absolutely beautiful. I think sometimes what can happen with empathy characters is they can get into no, actually I'm not even going to say that they can. So can also other characters. I think being a sensitive empathy character is really beautiful. And I think that my recognition of it is important for somebody that is an empathy character. And I think also standing as an empathy character in that, on the character levels, and not having other characters, types of characters, which are all valid and beautiful in their own right, push you around, because that's what often happens to the empathy character. Like, they're told they're too sensitive, or they shouldn't feel those feelings, and they're talked out of their self. And because an empathy character feels so many feelings, that it's so easy for an empathy character to get lost in confusion. But ultimately that's not who you are. And if you're an empathy character listening, not that it's that important, but if you are, you'll understand what I mean. Everyone has empathy, but there's some characters that just have an immense amount of it. You speak about patterns to recognize. I suffer from energies that produce patterns, or patterns-like situations. So patterns are secondary. I cannot get rid of the root energies of my soul and their painful, unbearable emotional impact. How to make disappear these energies when we are these energies? In my case, lethargic, submissive energy of my father and violent, insane energy of my mother. You can get rid of it. I don't know how to say your name. That's a very difficult name for me to say. You can get rid of it. Firstly, listening to non-duality is super important, recognizing who you truly are for these energies to change. And then also you could find somebody, like a really good therapist, that can help you understand and work through these things. And the therapist needs to be super good, and you need to have a good relationship with them, not necessarily good as in you get on, but good as in you are open to them. But it's absolutely possible. But these things need to be done simultaneously. You need to listen and recognize non-duality, and then you work on these patterns, and you work on this personhood. And if you could find a therapist that also understands non-duality, that's even better. But if not, then just use them for what they're good at, just pointing out the stuff that's untrue inside of you. And you know, there'll always be a tendency towards that. Hi Lisa. Was your process of awakening painful? Can you speak something about that? It could be painful at times, and it could be very blissful. But I found that what happened in my story was I had to sort of go back in on myself. So the person was a seeker that was seeking for relief in time, and it sort of turned around and it stopped using the time to try to find freedom and went back into what it was feeling and this seeking energy to get away from stuff. And as that happened, that could be incredibly painful, because when you're just blindly seeking, you're kind of getting pain relief by getting things, by achieving things, by people appreciating you. But as you stop seeing that as the freedom and you start going back into the feelings, then there is a certain amount of discomfort that has to be allowed to come up. It's like when you're separate, say if you've got a bottle with mud in it, and when you're separate and the separate person has shaken this bottle loads, and then you put it down on the table, and this is the waking up process, and it's like it takes time for that mud to settle down in the water again. And that settling can be painful, because the body keeps wanting to go to time to find relief, and time isn't going to save you. Time was never going to save you, because time doesn't exist. What exists is this present moment, is this alive presence. And that's imagination. And imagination is useful, but the humans got lost in imagination and begun to believe it exists in imagination. You aren't somebody that came into this room and sat down and listened to Lisa, and you were in a moment out there in the room before, and you're in a new moment now. You are the moment which is always present, and the body is coming and going in that, the world is coming and going in that. And you are this one endless moment which is still and in movement. Hi Steve, what's it all about? Stop complaining. You're so brave to do MTB. What's MTB? Oh, mountain biking. I did mountain running for 2 years, and I was so afraid of downhill running in the forest. All the people I was running with had small accidents in the activity, so I understand Khaleesi's fear. Yeah, she's got 4 legs though. It's easier. Yeah, I've got to admit, some of the routes I can't do anymore. Like sometimes when I did it with my friend, I can remember there was this one route that I did, and I was like next to this kind of cliff. It wasn't like a very high cliff, but it was like maybe like 10 meters high. So if I fell, I would be very injured. Maybe 20 meters high. And there was all this forest going down the cliff. And I remember I was just like paralyzed with fear on the bike going down, like, and I think I couldn't quite stop. I think my thinking kind of stopped, and there was no functioning to stop. I was stopping, like not letting myself go too fast, but I couldn't think, let's walk down this. And I just remember getting to the bottom, and I was like, I did not enjoy that. So some of them I don't do anymore. So beautiful, thank you. Always pleasure, Robert. Is this where you're reading the messages? Hey Doug, yeah. Hi Lisa, listening to you is not always interesting for me, but today I'm so touched by your words. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With pleasure. Hi Lisa, I feel compelled to make contact for all the obvious reasons, but I actually have a question also. What do you feel if the difference between your teaching and that of the traditional ashram? That's quite a hard question. Like, I don't know what type of traditional ashram you're thinking of. So Doug says, do I want to talk? Well, obviously, Doug, I don't know who you are, so I don't have any desire or want to talk to you. But if you have a question about non-duality, then I'm happy to answer it. Humans are funny. But if you just want to talk about life, like as in your life or my life, then I'm not so happy to talk. I'd rather you have a question about non-duality. I sagab you. Sorry. I just stumbled upon your live streams. The little I so far have understood is very close to biocentrism, which is very much Buddhist, but it's not. It's more in a scientific way. Have you heard of it? No, I've never heard of that before. Martin, welcome. Cup of tea. Yes, Sue, a girl can surely have tea. Oh, thanks. Biocentrism. Do you know, maybe I've been recommended it by someone. I tend to prefer audiobooks. Biocentrism. I do feel like I've heard of that. How life and consciousness are Kiryu's theory of everything. Yeah, I feel like I have heard of that before. I have to look on an Audible, which is an audiobook site, to see. It's called Audible. I didn't listen to your song the other day. Maybe we listen to it now. I forgot. Oh, thanks, Martin. That's great. Oh, sorry, that's my music now. Oh, I'm gonna. Thank you, Renee. That was beautiful. Let's see if there's any more questions. I might go soon. I understand empathy. I've always been told off for being too sensitive. Bless them all. I feel people's feelings as if they are my own. Well, they're not mine or theirs. I've learned through the yes, which are mine, and step back if it's uncomfortable. Thanks so much for your talks on my favourite topic. Yeah, that's a pleasure, Sue. And it just blows my mind, because for those that aren't empathy characters, they can't have empathy for empathy characters. So you get questions like from Jamil that says, isn't that just victim story? Because they can't imagine what that would be like to feel so much, because it's not their experience. It's so funny, but it takes me, I have to remind myself that other people aren't empathy people. It's only 5% or 10% of people that tend to be that sensitive. And even though people that aren't empathy people, they think they are, that they think they know what I'm talking about, but yeah. So it's and that's the way, if you are an empathy person, that you just have to really trust your feelings and not let somebody talk you out of it, and just walk away when you feel uncomfortable with something. I see so many people, the empathy people, lost in so much confusion because they are so sensitive. They're always more likely to try to listen to someone else because there's so many feelings they're feeling. Hello, Lisa. Hey, Eve. I'm so happy to see you live this morning. It's morning here in Hawaii. Hope you have a nice evening, and thank you so much for the talks. Oh, nice, Eve. Eva. And nice that you get to watch. Yeah, Hawaii is exactly the opposite, so it must be, I think, 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. depending on the time of year and the daily savings. But it can be, when I went to Hawaii, it was 12 hours behind Europe. Yeah, that was quite a big time jump. Nice. Okay, guys, thank you so much, and thank you for all your questions. Oh, Jamil says, I just feel that it's not very empathetic to judge someone in that way. Like, there's no problem, non-duality, not probing duality. I didn't think I was blaming anyone, Jamil, or judging anyone at all. I don't judge people that aren't don't strongly have empathy characteristics. They have other characteristics which are great. But I was answering why I asked people to have concise questions. But anyway, that's enough for tonight. Thank you guys for joining me, and I will be live again on Sunday at 6 p.m. French time. Thanks, guys. Bye.